Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to wrap up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. Today's comes at us from Anton. I've stumbled upon quite a unique album which mixes two very distinct music styles. They start out alternating between each other, but eventually culminate in this track that heavily mixes both elements. I know you'll look up the genres and probably roll your eyes after learning that one of them is black metal. But it's a fun kind, I promise. Hopefully it will pique your interest and you check out the rest of the album. Alright, let's dive into that then. The band is called Summer Haze 99. Comes off of the Inevitable album, which seems to be the only album they have. Came out in 2023, possibly a debut from them. The song we're checking out right now is called Voy Con Libertad, which is I go with liberty? I go with freedom, maybe? Something along those lines. I'll double check that when we hit the lyrics. Let's dive in though, see what Summer Haze is bringing to the table today. Black metal's gonna get mixed with this? Oh, this is gonna be fun, I think. The production already sort of speaks to a black metal style. It sounds very thin and stretched out. It's a wild sound. This is fantastic.
Pero fuerte sin ti lo acepté. Nadie me controla, libre yo viviré. Los recuerdos de nuestro amor guardaré. En mi corazón un tesoro siempre fiel.
It sounds very interesting. This punky sound feels a bit flat with the black metal style production on it, but I'm warming up to it. It's a little bit like listening to a hardcore concert from like one room over. You can still make out most of it, but it sounds a little muffled. The synth is an interesting touch. It's a wild rhythmic pattern too. Now, where are we going with this?
Todas mis decisiones me han traído hasta aquí. Y ahora, por fin ha llegado el momento. Todo fluye. Siento el sol en la cara, una sensación que he estado buscando durante mucho tiempo. Y sin embargo, todo estaba ya ahí. Solo tenía que abrir los ojos. No importa lo que traiga el día siguiente, todo lo que importa es este momento, cuando todo se une y caminamos entre los dioses.
You know what's crazy too is the melody for some reason reminds me of Pachelbel's Canon. I think it's part of like the arpeggiation off on the right plus the melody. Oh, this is fantastic. Love the cymbal work too. Some people just have all the creativity. Dang, man. What in the world? I love it. Huh. Yeah, how long is this album? Debut album, I think. Again, it's the only one Spotify has for him. 40 minutes across 6 songs, all of them averaging about 7 minutes apiece. Yeah, I think that's going to have to go on my short list. I'm so surprised by this. It's a very cool collection of sounds. I don't know if it's something I'm going to love, where I continuously come back to it, but I do want to see what else is done with this, and if there's any other types of combinations going on. Maybe every song is just punk plus black metal, with the dash of pop thrown in there, but maybe they're not. Right? What else is going on this album? I have to know. And it's 6 tracks. I mean, that's nothing. It will not take me a lot of time, even if I end up just thinking the album's mid for whatever reason, that's not a lot of time. It's not like I'm going to feel like I wasted it. I gotta check it out, man. All right, so geez, what's going on in here? Right from the start, it's very punky. We can listen to the chord progressions, which, geez, where are those? We'll come back to those in a second. The guitars primarily play chords, chord progressions, root tones across this. It really depends on what's going on. In the punkier sections, we're getting full chords. In that full-on black metal part, that was somewhere like minute 4 or 5, we were getting just pedal tones, just the root notes of the chord. What else? Oh yeah, lots of rhythmic stuff going on in here, though. Primarily because of the punkier drums that I think really define a lot of the punk aesthetic on a majority of this track. Lots of very fun syncopation with the bass kick against rigid snare accents. Very fun cymbal work, even in the more rigid, less syncopated like bass and snare stuff going on. There's always some sort of fun rhythmic thing coming out of the drums. It creates a lot of the groove, a lot of the danciness, a lot of that upbeat energy. The drummer is what's really driving a lot of that. The bass, if it is a bass, I don't know. I hear some low tones sometimes. It could also just be a guitar, maybe I don't know, a lower string on a guitar, maybe like a 7-string or something. It could also be an octave pedal, I suppose. Something about it doesn't feel bassy though. That's the only reason I bring this up. Anyways, pedal tones all day long. Not a lot of interesting stuff coming out of the bass. Really foundational work, having a role of being that strong core ground for everything else to be built on top of. For the most part, a lot of this musically is very straightforward. We got chords, we got some groove, and atmosphere is derived from that. The main thing that I think allows this song to keep my attention for the most of it is the vocals that come in. They provide the melody, they provide some really interesting harmonic flavoring. Like I've mentioned in the past, most people, when I say harmony, they're going to think of the chords, the chord progression, but the melody informs the feeling of the atmosphere along with the chords just as much as the chords themselves. And sometimes I'll even say that the vocal melody, or any lead melody, doesn't have to be vocals, can be more informative to the way a song feels and how it plays against the chords than just the chords themselves. When you think about it, the lead melody is just another note in the chord, and it can change the properties of the chord. So yeah, sometimes the vocals are just going to fit right in. Other times they're going to define a song. I say vocals, again, I mean lead melody. But in this case, the lead melody does, yeah, it is on the vocals. And they do kind of take us to some interesting places harmonically, too. The guitars will lay down a specific vibe, and then the vocals come in. It kind of changes things up a little bit. Usually, in this song, it brightens things, it pulls things up a little bit, gives it a little bit more of a positive energy, which I think is an interesting idea. But it's also, we'll get to that in a second. Yeah, that's pretty much the makeup of most sections of this track, though. Harmony from the strings, rhythm from the drums, and then the vocal melody. There's not a lot of nuance, there's not a lot of progressive elements in individual riffs going on in here. It's a lot of just follow the rhythm and play the chord that you're currently in on the chord progression, and you're set. The drummer, like I said, has the most movement as far as I'd say complexity in playing, and that's just because they're constantly introducing syncopated hits in order to create a groove that drives the song forward. Now, harmonically, this is very, well, right from the start, it covers a lot of ground, and mostly because these genres have a lot of overlap too in them, but there's some pop emo in here, there is some post-hardcore, there is some traditional punk drum work, sure, but harmonically, I don't really hear a lot of traditional punk here. Maybe there is and I'm just missing it. There's also some poppy elements in here. I said pop emo, but I also think maybe a little bit of, I don't know, the poppier side of shoegaze melodies. Um, there's a genre for that, and I'm blanking on it. Um, but there is something that sort of sweetens up a lot of the heavier sounds that are coming from the guitar work. That's not to say that the guitars are all heavy emotionally. There is a lot of positivity in them too. It's just that I feel that the vocal melodies, like I mentioned earlier, kind of pull the guitars up even further at times. It has a very pop aesthetic to it as far as the harmonic properties are, and sort of changes the songs to have a little bit more positivity to them when the vocals are present. It's an interesting idea because we do have parts of the song that feel a bit more darker, and then we have sort of a neutral sound, and then we have the brighter sound that the vocals typically introduce. And it's interesting to sort of see this ebb and flow that the song has, moving between these. It's not so much like separate ideas, sort of like a spectrum of brightness or darkness on the song harmonically. It creates a song that for me is difficult to read emotionally because it's sort of all over the place. It generally never hits really dark lows like, I don't know, like doom metal would have, but it never gets bubblegum sweet like pop music. It's all rather neutral on the whole, but it still covers a pretty large range within that neutrality. And I dig it. I do. It's an interesting combination. It almost feels like it doesn't quite know what it wants, but because like generally speaking, like when we take like the vast amount of what music can do, it's such a small part that it feels very singular when you have the context of like all of music around it. Even though when I'm listening to it, I'm like, oh, this is, very bouncy, very dancey. Oh, this one's a bit heavier. This one feels like some weight to it. I mean, it all still matches somehow. So there is some sort of cohesion to it all, even though I feel like there's, vast jumps between the highs and lows here. Like I said, that kind of makes it difficult for me to place the song emotionally, and without that, I kind of have a tough time feeling a narrative on this track. It's definitely going to be something that's a bit outside of what I've heard before, which makes it fresh, makes it new, makes it a little more difficult to sort of pigeonhole into an idea, which honestly, I mean, it helps me with my job to say, oh, this reminds me of this, and I can just be like, oh, this is the word for this section. It's just going to take a few listens for me to, I think, have a stronger opinion and idea of what this is trying to do artistically from a narrative standpoint. But just musically, very cool to be on this roller coaster ride. I mentioned the drummer a few times. I love the drum work on this. It's, I mean, we have black metal blast beats, alternating bass and snare towards the end of the song. At the beginning, we have, I think, like snare on 1 and 3 and syncopated kicks around it while riding the ride cymbal, just laying that down pretty straightforward. I think that was constant eighth notes. Just a really fun, syncopated, punky beat. But even when we get into the more straightforward black metal sections, there's still really fun ride cymbal stuff going on too. And I think hi-hat at one point as well. Just fun syncopated ideas in there. It reminds me a little bit of some of the cooler black metal bands out there whose drummer likes to introduce interesting rhythms alongside that rigid 16th note assault. The first one that comes to mind, Umgwa. I like that drummer. He's just a beast, and he knows how to inject melody into his drum work. And I kind of hear a lighter side of that on this track too, with some of those, with the cymbal work that shows up in places. To me, it lightens it up a little bit. And I know black metal like enthusiasts are going to be like, no, it shouldn't be light at all. Nah, but for me, I prefer a little bit of levity in my music. Honestly, I prefer a lot of bit of levity in my music, but I'll take it where I can when we get to the more extreme metal sections. And fun cymbal work is one of those things that I quite enjoy. And I like having it show up in here as well, but pairing it with the syncopated bass work that gives us that punky, dancey feel that makes us want to get into a mosh pit and start skanking. Yeah, I'm down with that. The way that we can bounce between those two ideas is pretty cool. It makes the song feel dynamic, wildly dynamic. I honestly don't know how the song meshes. At no point in this did I think, oh, this doesn't belong here at all. Moving from that punkier stuff into the metal section felt natural, and honestly, I don't know how. It's going to be another one of those things I need a few more listens on to maybe see where I can find the connective tissues on it. In isolation, I don't think any of this should work. The drum parts are so diverse, so different from each other, and yet, I don't know, it works, right? Even when we talk about even when we talk about the guitar work on this, right? I'm like, it's chords all the way through. Yeah, that's partly true, but the chords move a lot slower in the punkier sections. They tend to match either the syncopated rhythms of the drums, or they just play, I don't know, they'll hit a note and hold it out for a couple of beats and then play the next chord when it's ready to come in. The black metal part, though, that's that constant 16th note picking right there. Just an onslaught of sound, kind of the same. We're just getting chords, but a very different sonic texture to that. How does that work together? I don't know. It does, though. My gut tells me maybe it's the production. It's definitely consistent. It is one of the few consistent elements of the song, and it has a bit of its own identity to it. It's it's mid-fi at best. There's clarity. I can hear all the instruments, but it still sounds rather muffled. I think if you take the opening couple of minutes of this track and pair it against your favorite pop emo or poppier side of post-hardcore song, you're going to find that those have a lot of clarity to them, a lot of coloring to them, and they feel less generally muffled or hazy than this song does. It's one of the things that stood out to me immediately because I'm familiar with these sounds, the chords, the notes being played, but I'm not familiar with them in this production. It kind of created a bit of a clash for me. It would be like watching your favorite black and white film that somebody on the internet has decided to colorize. Yeah, like you get it, but this is not how you're familiar with it at all. I guess this would be the opposite though, removing color. Has anyone ever taken like a color picture and turned it black and white and it actually turned out good? Maybe even better? I don't know. That's way off topic here, just where my mind went. But yeah, it sounds unfamiliar with in a production I'm not. And that was a bit of a hurdle to get over. I think I eventually got through it. The end of the song felt less alien to me. But it's still something that ties everything together because that production never changes. Like I mentioned a couple of minutes into the track, it felt like going to, a hardcore concert, but listening to it the room over. Not necessarily outside of the building, which would be beyond muffled, but just with a little bit of that quality kind of removed and muffled out a little bit. Maybe like the conference room over, where you've lost like 10% of that clarity. Concerts aren't done in conference halls. I don't know. Anyways, it's like I said, it's mid-fi. It's definitely muffled, but I can hear everything. It's a best of both worlds situation, and it does tie everything together. When we hit that black metal section, yeah, the production feels like it fits there, but it's also a sound I've begun to acclimate to in general. And so when we pull back out to a punkier side, albeit kind of mixing the two a bit more to wrap up the song, I'm on board with it here. It doesn't feel too separated from anything else. I think that's why my gut goes in that direction. I think it'd be curious, or I am curious, to hear this song with a more traditional production on the punkier sections, and we can retain that mid-fi sound on the black metal. And something tells me that wouldn't connect too well, but I think that experiment's also a bit flawed, because it wouldn't necessarily point towards the production alone. I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out why this works. I'm very confused by it. Enamored a little bit, sure. Perplexed, but ultimately intrigued. So I just my brain's like, we got to figure this one out. Why does this work when everything says it shouldn't? Now, I did mention that the production was one of the consistent elements of this track. The other one are the vocals, and to me, it's the thing that's going to allow me to get through an album of it. If at any point the vocalist decided to pull out some black metal shrieks, one, it would have fit perfectly. From an artistic perspective, I was honestly expecting it. I would not have any criticism for it for that perspective. But, just my own opinion, I love clean vocals, and I don't love black metal shrieks. So I'm really glad that the vocals were consistent across this. It helps tie the disparate sections together a little bit, and maybe that alongside the production is the glue that holds everything together. We also do have the chord progression in general that's consistent throughout as well. That certainly helps. Which does make me question why the black metal sections feel like black metal. They even feel heavier and darker. There's no vocals in those parts, though. Dude, it's going to be a conundrum that I'm just mulling over in my head all day. Why does Summer Haze 99 work? Jeez. But the vocals sound great. I love the projection of them. Even though they are a bit muffled to fit a bit more with the band, I feel like they have more clarity too, just a hair bit more. It allows the vocals to have a bit of extra character to them that I don't necessarily hear in the guitars. I think part of it is just that the vocals aren't necessarily distorted in any way. A bit of compression on them, sure, but I mean, they don't have overdrive like the guitars do. So that might be enough just to give them a little bit of extra boost, not just in clarity, but also in presence. They do dominate the song. What I found was interesting is when we got to the spoken word part, I think this was actually louder than the sung part, or maybe it's just that the instrumentation under it was quieter. I liked this section as a whole, kind of bringing the energy down to build out of. The spoken word was nice. I'm curious to dive into that, see what's being said there. And it allows the song to grow out of it. Like I said, the vocals were just a little loud here, a little too dominant in the mix, I think, my opinion on it. But, I mean, everything sort of comes together in a very odd way that I still, 20 minutes later, after talking about all the cool things going on, I still don't know why it works. But it is, to wrap this up, a very cool combination of sounds and somehow bringing them together into a cohesive package that even has like flow to it. I feel like most of the ideas grew and shrunk out of each other into the next ones rather fluidly. There were a couple of harsher transitions, but for the most part, even with the wide gap between like pop, post-hardcore, and black metal, it still generally flows in a way that feels cohesive and conjoined and thoroughly thought out. I can get behind a lot of ideas in here, even if the rest of the album ends up not necessarily being to my taste. There's so many things in here that absolutely work for me. And I appreciate finding something like this that just, like I said, just wild creativity on this and so many different moving parts that somehow end up working together. Let me hit some lyrics. All right, this is wild. The other song we checked out today is a song from Low called Nothing But Heart. And as far as my interpretation of the lyrics, is it was two people separating, going their own ways, and being positive about this separation. This is a song about somebody going their own way and being positive about this and trying not to have the pain of the past upon them, even though that they seem to miss the person who they thought was going to be on this path with them. How does this stuff line up? Oh, geez. Okay, so lyrics. These are all translated from Spanish. So My Spanish is very weak, but it looks like it's a decent enough translation, and it actually comes across rather well in the English too, which is unusual for Google Translate. Usually there's some stuff that sounds a bit weird. Anyways, it says, alone, but strong, I accepted it without you. No one controls me, I will live free. The memories of our love I will keep in my heart, a treasure, always faithful. I'm better alone, though, with no one around. I can be myself, without fear, without pain. The moments that we had together I'll never forget, and in my mind you will always be present. So I take the reins and I go forward. I've learned to love myself, and that is what is important. I follow my path, and I leave the past. There's nothing that can stop me. I go with freedom. So I was kind of close on that with the title. I said it was I go with liberty. I go with freedom. I was kind of close on that. But yeah, it's about moving on forward by yourself, embracing who you are, having the confidence in yourself to do this alone, leaving fear and pain behind, even though you weren't expecting to take this journey on your own. Never forgetting the best parts of the relationship that is now being left behind and taking your next step forward. It's a beautiful message. Now, one thing though, this is 12 lines across 3 stanzas. I heard a lot more than that in the song, and there's also that entire spoken word section in the bridge. I went back and listened to it, tried to line it up with the lyrics, and apparently that's not part of the lyrics. I found these on their Bandcamp, which means that they put them there. I also found them on Metal Archives, which lines up with the Bandcamp lyrics. Nowhere I looked seems to cover what is said during the spoken word. So I'm not sure what goes on there. I have to assume, though, as singular, all 3 of these stanzas pretty much saying the exact same thing. I expect the spoken word to be in a similar vein, but I suppose it could go in the opposite direction, being that there's a shift in vocal delivery, there could be a shift in perspective, and maybe it is a little bit of self-doubt, but having to push through it in order to, take this next step into life. But at this point, I don't know. It's all hypothesis because no one seems to have that part written down anywhere. So, tying this back to the music, I've got nothing. I've tried to figure out how the music could represent this, other than the fact that just the punkier aspects, with that strong, poppier style of vocal delivery, fits well a song about positivity like this. In fact, the black metal part is the section that seems to fit the least, as it is the heaviest. It is a weight pushed down upon the listener, and presumably a weight that puts itself down on the vocalist too, or the narrator, right? But nothing in here has that pain to it. Yeah, like I said, there is a bit of negativity here. I wasn't expecting to be alone. I have all these memories of you. I'm gonna keep them in my head. The positive parts. There's a little bit of negativity to that, but not in the way that the black metal feels to me. And then there's also the bridge, which kind of takes the energy down a little bit, kind of makes things feel a little more vulnerable. That's sort of what led me to think maybe the spoken word section is a bit of a inverse of what's being sung in the majority of the song. But I don't know how much of the music is actually informed by the lyrics or vice versa, because I have such a tough time really pairing them together. It feels like an interesting song with some great lyrics on top, instead of something where all of the aspects are written to inform each other and to be stronger emotionally because of that, emotionally and thematically. But I enjoyed this nonetheless. It does make me want to listen to more of Summer Haze 99. But these are just my thoughts. What do you think of this? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that you would like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Maybe you have your own interpretation or opinion on this track. Please put any of that and any other thoughts you might have down into the comments section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. They don't have a lot of viewers on Spotify. I don't know why I can't see it anymore. I think it was only like 100 or something like that. Oh, 64. So I'm going to link Summer Haze's 99's links in the description box as well. Social media, websites, streaming platforms. If you're interested in it, all those links will be there. Above the description box, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. If you head on over to any of their pages, like, subscribe, thumbs up, stars, whatever. Show them some love from the Critical Reactions community. That's going to wrap it up for today, though. I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC, as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.